I was reading the Washington Post and started reading an article that describes, through the magic of journalism, how major U.S. cities, gripped with the crisis of this pandemic, these cities now face a spike in deadly shootings. I'm sure you're familiar with what happened over the 4th of July weekend. You know, we've got financial catastrophe and a pandemic, social justice protests, demands for equal protection under the law, and all of a sudden we also have a spike in violence in some of our major cities. 65 people shot over the weekend in New York, 87 people shot in Chicago, homicides climbing from Miami to Milwaukee. Now, the summer months in the United States of America are often punctuated with more than average for the rest of the year violence. A lot of the violence occurs in black communities of color. And one of the reasons for that, in my humble opinion as a white person, is because the policing attitudes in the black communities for generations have been attitudes of suppression, oppression, violence against people, rough treatment of people for just walking down the street, slamming people up against a wall and doing a body search, coupled with the injustice perpetrated against black folk in this country since forever. And it tends to push the sense of violence deeper into the community so that when it explodes among members of the community. That's what our mayor here in Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who, by the way, announced yesterday that she was positive for COVID-19. But it's what prompted Mayor Bottoms here to point out that the violence that occurred in Atlanta was shootings were by black folk. I don't know Keisha Bottoms. I have watched her over the years because I live in Atlanta, and she's certainly been visible. But at the news conference she held Sunday, along with family members of this 8-year-old little girl, Sequoia Turner, who was shot and killed over the weekend, as I watched Mayor Bottoms, she was pissed. She was infuriated. She said, "This has got to stop. This has got to stop." I'll get back to that in a second. But this recent toll of gun violence has been particularly devastating in communities where the victims include young children. Mayor Bottoms said at that news conference on Sunday, quote, "You shot and killed a baby," end quote. This 8-year-old was fatally shot while she was riding in a car with her mother Saturday night. And I mentioned this yesterday, I think. The car had just turned off the expressway, the downtown expressway, to go home. That same night, 11-year-old Devon McNeil was at an anti-violence cookout in Washington, D.C. when bullets struck him. In Chicago, 7-year-old Natalia Wallace was outside her family's house during a holiday gathering when the shooting began. Both children, the 11-year-old in D.C. and the 7-year-old in Chicago, were killed. And the 8-year-old in Atlanta. Jesus Christ. What? Never mind. Now, this burst of bloodshed and violence comes at a particularly upsetting time in our relationship with police. Because look at the demonstrations, and rightly so, against police tactics and brutality and executions in the street and racism. This time following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis in May. And in these demonstrations that have occurred globally, not just in the United States, but in various cities in South Asia, Africa, Europe, South America. You know, I've said before, racism is not exclusively American. We just kill more people on a racial basis than other countries do. But in the social upheaval that has occurred since the murder of George Floyd, police have been facing calls from people in the community for the defunding of their departments, their operations to be stripped down, which puts them on the defensive, the cops, because they've been at the center of this political and social storm that's just raging across the country. And when they talk about defunding the police, I hope, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, to say I hope all white people understand what defunding means, I might as well talk to the hand. There's so many white people here. Defund the police departments. And then you have this monstrous orange ape son of a bitch in the White House who has turned that into one of several of his political commercials now. Have you seen those? Jesus Christ. Defunding or stripping down cop operations in various cities means reducing them from paramilitary organizations who just stomp around shooting people and strangling people and sitting on their necks and treating people like dirt. It means taking some of the resources that go to provide the most sophisticated weapons of mass destruction that the police can now use against people, and redirecting those funds into communities where this crime is so rampant, and directing it into the communities where programs can be initiated, whether they're about education or small businesses or health care or self-policing or cleaning up neighborhoods. Change it. Change the dynamic of what policing is. To protect and defend has become a goddamn joke. But it's my suspicion that so many white people, when they hear that defund the police departments, they're going to get the thought in their mind that Trump wants them to have. In New York, where police officials have really gotten pissed off in the face of criticism. Yeah, they just get pissed off. Instead of listening, instead of trying to work with community leaders, just get pissed off. That'll work. But the chief there, Terrence Monahan, described the 4th of July holiday in New York City as, quote, one of the most violent weekends we've had in recent history, end quote. And he called the entire month of June record-setting. He was at a briefing about crime statistics yesterday, and he said, quote, this is a tough summer. it's quite obvious a lot of people are walking around with guns. Well, there you are. Yeah. This culture, this American culture, is so violent. It always has been. I don't mean all of a sudden violence in American culture just popped up out of the weeds. But in so many states now where these open carry laws are in effect, where anybody can walk the streets carrying a weapon, what the hell is that? Well, it's the American sickness. Some law enforcement officials and their political allies have tried to link the recent violence with these anti-brutality protests. Sure. That's what Trump is doing. Yesterday, the Republican National Committee Chair, Ronna McDaniel, was on the Fox sewer and said that the demonstrations have, quote, now led to a lot of violence continuing to happen across the country. It's sad to me that we're not hearing Democrats talk about the 7 children that were killed this past weekend, most of them African American. We're not hearing about things that are happening across this country as the violence continues to spread out of control, end quote. Well, what the hell do we expect the chairperson of the Republican National Committee to say? Wouldn't it be, it would be impossible to hear this person talk about, we need to improve the lives of people who have been so brutalized by our system since forever. Just once, I'd like to hear some of these white people, just these white conservatives, just once before I die, I'd like to hear one of these white conservatives say, you know what? We have so screwed the system. We have enslaved people for 400 years. We've treated an entire race of people like dirt, like animals. We've deprived and denied them. We've stolen from them. We've taken from them. We've brutalized them. We got to stop this. Yeah, just once. Just once. Just once.
Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. You have your choice. You can listen to The Ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.